Hello and welcome to another episode of Mysteries with the History, where I'll take you on a wild ride into the unknown, the strange, and the mysterious. Like you, I have questions, and like you, I want answers. First off, I want to say hi to some people in the live chat: Exofa, Stefan, Anthony, Jonaside, Al, Hides, Canoodles, Trouble Minds. How is everyone doing today? New Mexico is pretty notorious when it comes to strange UFO sightings and crashes. And you can't talk about the UFO phenomenon without mentioning the infamous state. There's also strange tales of ghosts, monsters, miracles, lost treasure, and much more can be found not far from the birthplace of the atomic bomb. To those listening through a podcast platform, I will be showing a lot of pictures, so the link to the YouTube channel is below in the description box. Now, let me bring in my friend and co-host, Jimmy Church from Fade to Black Radio. Hey, Jimmy, how are you? Thank you so much, aka Stink. Have a great show. I'll listen tomorrow at work.
I almost got busted sneaking up on somebody like that. Hey, that was awesome. Started off the show with no audio. That was cool.
You know, it happens from time to time, but there's so much to cover today, Jimmy, and I'm so excited.
Cristina, let me jump in. Tap on your mic. It's not working. Wrong microphone. That's why I'm here.
Okay, how about now?
There we go.
No, that's new. It usually always connects. So it's this new
just one thing after another, man. It's them aliens, man. It's them aliens. It's them aliens. It's the Anasazi.
Well, thank you for checking on that, because it's to the point where it's always automatic. So the first time that it didn't do that,
don't worry about it. We've already moved on from that, Cristina. We've way moved on past that microphone. All right. So I get to say the words. Great topic for today. And there's a lot to cover here. Everybody, we've got some things. New Mexico is so special, and Cristina knows this, and we have featured different things over. It's been a year. How long have we
almost
been? Yeah. And so when you talk about New Mexico, you still have to speak about those things, but there's so much more and to discover and talk about. And we're going to do all of that today, and we'll do a little dance around some other subjects that we've covered before, but also we've always got new people that are here and they haven't listened to shows from the past, and so you'll always get the comment, why aren't they talking about that more? Why did they just blow past it? Well, it's because we did 2 hours on that in the past, and we are talking about other stuff today. So visit all of the past shows, and you can check out some of the stuff we've done on New Mexico before. But another great topic. Now, what's really great, I'm totally fired up, and I never... I noticed in the chat, Jimmy's here early. I'm never relaxing. You're never going to see me just kicking back, doing nothing. I know I'm always on my game. I'm lurking in the shadows and on top of things, aren't I, Cristina?
Always.
Yeah, always. So, how's your coffee world? Some people.
It's pretty good.
Is it good these days?
It's pretty fantastic these days, and we might get into that a little bit later, but there's so much we need to cover. And when people usually think of New Mexico, they instantly think of Roswell when it comes to the UFO phenomenon. So I would actually like to start off with a paranormal story before we get into the UFO crashes and sightings. And I've mentioned time and time again, I love a good story. Have it be a myth, a legend, or a type of campfire story. I'm always all ears. And there is one that just haunts New Mexico, and that is called La Llorona. So, La Llorona is Spanish for weeping woman, and it's been a part of the Hispanic culture in the Southwest, apparently since the days of the conquistadors. So, this tall, thin spirit is said to be blessed with natural beauty and flowing black hair. She wears a white or black gown and roams the rivers and creeks, wailing into the night and searching for children, screaming to a watery grave. Have you heard of this lore, Jimmy?
It's so fascinating. I've heard not only this and versions of it since I was a little kid. And so I think it's part now. It is Latino, and I get that, but it's just part of popular culture too, as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
It definitely is. There's been quite a few movies on the topic, and I'm going to share my screen of what it could possibly
It would make a
look
good
like.
movie. Is it a Mexican movie?
I've actually never seen it. No,
Okay.
I happened to find these pictures when I was doing research for today's show. Here's how this scary woman looks, and there's a lot of stories of people in the past and even in present day that have encountered an entity like this one. So, let's get into a few more details on this. And so, no one really knows when the legend of La Llorona began or even how it originated. Though the tales vary from source to source, the common thread is that she's a spirit of a doomed mother who drowned her own children and spends eternity searching for them in rivers and lakes. If she finds a child roaming alone, she will claim it as her own.
Ooh,
In I know,
I know,
spooky.
right.
So in many of the legends and even in recent stories for those that have encountered La Llorona, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, she travels through water. So, and it's all across the South, New Mexico, Texas, Mexico as well, and even states a little bit higher, such as Colorado. And it's believed that if she lifts her veil and you see her eyes, you are doomed to help her find her children's bone in the afterlife. So she'll either try to kill you and make you find her children, or if you're a child, she'll just snatch you up and take you as her own. I would like to mention that this is a pretty common legend again in the South United States and including Mexico. So a lot of parents, a lot of mothers would tell this type of story to their children to scare them and say, "Look, if you run off in the middle of the night, La Llorona's going to get you and you're never going to come home again."
Got that
So
right.
so it does definitely scare children. And while I'm not too familiar with this story, um, I've I'm I've heard bits and pieces of it, and it always does fascinate me. So I was pretty excited to do the research for this show in particular. And there is one story that I came across that actually happened in 2008, and it's a very, very short story. So I'm just going to read it over. And this was posted just on a regular website. So no, we don't know if this really did happen, but there's just a handful, like a whole thread, and the link I will place in the description box below a little bit later of where you can find all of these stories where people believe they encountered this evil entity.
Get
So,
to it. What happened?
well, I'm going to tell you right now,
I
and
want
I'm reading it as it is. So it says, La Llorona woke me up once when I was camping at Indian Falls Rapids on the Yampa River in Colorado when I was 15. I walked with her to a cabin, and there was a man in the bed. All I saw was his foot, but when she yelled at me to run, I did. If I didn't smash my toe on a rock, I would have run off the cliff into the Indian Falls Rapids. And this is, again, just a very, very short
I love it.
story.
I love it.
And she goes and she continues that she happened to see an article in the Mountain Gazette, which is a social media platform, where they talked about La Llorona. And to her interest, the way they described it and the pictures that they showed on this social media platform, she believed at that moment when she was 15 years old, she really was face to face with La Llorona. And while, again, this is like a kind of a campfire story or one to scare your children with, some people really believe it to be real. And again, there's a good handful of stories where people have encountered a woman in all white or all black wearing a veil. And in like northern Mexico legend as well, they do go in detail and state that if you're out at night on your own and you hear a woman screaming, you don't want to walk over there because it's
No,
gonna be this woman.
no,
She's gonna take you.
yeah, you don't want to do. I remember the version of the story that I heard the most, and there are several. Was that she was married to some rich dude and was living the life. Caught him cheating. She freaks out and decides to kill their children, their children, and then drowns them in the ocean by the beach. This is how I remember it. You said river earlier. I've always pictured a beach. Anyway, and then freaks out, doesn't want it, but it's too late. Kids are dead. She tries to bring them back to life. That doesn't work. And then she kills herself and doesn't go to heaven. She's like stuck in the netherworld and is forced into finding her children or something like that, like some version of that. And so she's wandering the planet looking for her children, stuck in this in between. And that's the story, that she was stunningly beautiful, white gown or white dress. I don't remember a veil or anything, but anyway, that's the story. And there's versions of it and things, but I'm just kind of boiling it down,
Right.
and that's the story as I got it. Was she's combing the beaches, and if you ever see a woman in a white dress on a beach, she's not shooting a music video for TikTok. Stay away. Stay away.
Like you had said, there are a bunch of different versions, but the collective idea of the story is a beautiful woman who ended up drowning her own children. Now, her relationship with the husband is different from story to story or location to location, but for the most part, we are giving you the gist of the story. And there are movies on it if you do want to watch it. There are books on it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched it. I haven't
I'll
watched
watch
it.
it. I'm down for that.
I'm not too fond of scary movies.
You say it so well. How do you say it?
La Llorona, the weeping woman.
I can't. I'll sound too gringo. I always, La Llorona.
Hey, it's not that bad.
All right. What's up next? Man, that's a good story, though.
I feel like that was a great way to start off the show. We always talk about starting off with UFO stories, but I think starting off with a paranormal one, a good legend.
Yeah. Yeah,
just like a nice little flavor, like a little extra spice to your guacamole,
Literally. Okay, what's up next?
Well, the next one is Choco Canyon.
Oh,
this one's pretty cool. This is a pretty cool story for those that aren't familiar with it.
Let me go back. You're surprising me here. Let me look at. Oh, it is on the show notes. Okay,
it is on the show notes. And from here down, we will be doing everything in chronological order by date here forward. So this one, Jimmy, while I do really enjoy the story, you have a more personal connection to it than I do. So, why is this place significant in New Mexico?
Well, you're referring to the Anasazi?
I am.
Okay,
The
well,
Native Americans, the Anasazi.
Choco Canyon, for me, and the Anasazi, and again, for those that don't know about Chaco Canyon, I'll hand this back to Cristina in just a second. But when I was a kid, well, I was 25, working in Hollywood, producing bands, and I ran my studio off of the Sunset Strip. And one of the guys that worked for us there was from Brazil. And he was also my age. He was 24, 25 years old, a really good musician. And Gustavo was his name. And Gustavo had a band and that he was recording all the time and working on called Anasazi, and had a really cool logo. And I was like, dude, what is that, Brazilian? What is that? I'm a kid. And he goes, no, man, you don't know the story of the Anasazi. And then he laid it out that they disappeared. They were picked up by UFOs and went back to their world. And I was like, where was this? Chaco Canyon. And so when you're that young and impressionable, and we hear this, all the time, when you're that young and impressionable, but it had an impact on me, and I always followed the Anasazi and jumped into that conversation and listened when it came up over the years, and then of course, years later, doing what I'm doing now. And the fascination that I have with Choco Canyon and the Anasazi, it's an honest one, but it's a real place. It's in New Mexico, and it's one of the most dramatic geographic locations on planet Earth, with a crazy story to it. So for those that don't know, who are the Anasazi and what is Choco Canyon?
So this specific dwelling is called Pueblo Bonito, which is the pretty village located in Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. And this is where an entire population of the Anasazi, the Native Americans, allegedly just disappeared overnight. And this dwelling is believed to be from about 1,000 years ago. But from my understanding and the research that I've done, no one really has a definite time period of when these people were here. The date kind of kept changing, so it's about 1,000, maybe at the most 2,000 years ago. But it's just believed that a whole population of people just disappeared, and this was a huge place, a total of about 32 square miles, and it contains more than 24,000 archaeological sites in that area, and that's just a sliver of the picture of that whole kind of city, and that's in quotation marks. But so it's just believed by some that people just disappeared in thin air. Now, there are some other reasons, more conventional explanations, that maybe everyone got massacred and everyone just kind of fled from there, or that they endured an epidemic. So there's a lot of speculation, and this place in Chaco Canyon is it's a former state that now lies across the portions of the four modern states of New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, which is a pretty good placement, I think, today and even at that time. So, what's interesting about this place, and while many of us can believe that maybe they just had some conventional explanation to why all of them left, they left without bringing anything with them. They left everything as it was. They left all their tools, all of their like cooking supplies. Everything was left there, and it wasn't excavated until the late 1800s. But there are some ancient alien theorists that believe that it's not something that we can easily explain. Throughout the petroglyphs across the walls in this area, you see a lot of these swirly designs. Usually, these designs can mean or is relating to a solstice, either a winter or a summer solstice. But ancient alien theorists believe that it's not necessarily that, but it could very well be related to a portal.
Right. Or the solar system.
Or the solar system. That is also correct. So, again, no one has the definite answer. These are merely all speculations of what people think is going on. So, you have the solstice, you have portals, and you have the solar system as all potential explanations for this. And that's why it's so exciting. Dave Politis from Missing 411 has done extensive research in the area and along with ancient aliens. And what I'm continuing now is based off of memory. But he created a documentary called Vanished. And if you haven't seen any of Dave Politis's documentaries or films, I recommend it. They are fantastic. And in the documentary Vanished, he talks about this specific location, Chaco Canyon, where in modern times a couple was hiking in the area because now it's kind of classified as like a national like a public area. You're able to go there. Anyone can go. And there was a husband, a wife, and a child. And the husband was a more avid hiker compared to his wife. And so he told her, "Hey, I'm going to walk a little ahead of you, but I will wait for you on the other side. Like, just when you get there, I'll be there waiting for you." And they were very much in love. And this was also a pretty common thing for him. He would usually hike ahead of her and then wait for her at the destination where their finish point. But when the wife had gotten there, and this is probably in the 2000s, I don't remember the exact date, but it was sometime during the early 2000s. When she went at that specific location where I showed that picture earlier of the canyon where the town is carved practically into the canyon, he wasn't there. He just wasn't there. So she kept screaming for him and calling for him, and he never arrived. She waited hours and hours and he never showed up. This this was not common for her husband when she was explaining this to Dave Politis, that he was a very loving man. He would never do anything like that. And to this day, he still hasn't been found. What's where I'm getting with this is that Dave Politis and I believe Ancient Aliens did a test on the time distortion there. And this is documented on film. You can probably find it. And what I found and what they found was that time was just distorted by a few milliseconds from inside of from where those people were in that canyon area to just outside of the canyon. The time was different and that was tested. So that's a possibility to why these ancient alien theorists believe that what these petroglyphs are holding could very well be a portal instead of relating to a type of solstice. Jimmy, when you had heard this story in your 20s, did that conversation ever come up?
I was told they left on spaceships.
That's awesome.
That's what I was told. That's what I was told. That they just got on their ships and left. And now that I mean, everybody knows how old I am. I'm 58, and that was 30 more than 30 years ago. And this isn't like part of some conspiracy tinfoil hat circle. These are a couple of musicians talking on the Sunset Strip. This wasn't at a MUFON meeting. It was presented to me that way. And there's but going back to this point that you just made, this time dilation and time difference about different areas there. There is, I think it's called Choco Kettle. Do you have an image of Chaco? Man, I'm gonna have to look it up. It's the kettle. It's the big round temple that is there, and there's 3 of them. And now, not only you just mentioned how big Choco Canyon is, it's massive. And off on the horizon, going off in each direction, are other temple sites, and
That's
they
right.
all align, and they do they align to stars. They align to magnetic north, and all of this without if the Anasazi were where they were supposed to be technically, they don't have telescopes and things. So they knew about these very special areas there, and nobody knows what these temples were used for. The kettle itself is massive. And when you look at, it's very near the town under the cliff, it's very near there, and all of this had to have been important. It's significant, and there is no source of water there. I don't know if you brought that up. There's no source of water. They would have to have brought in water and food. There wasn't anything growing then or now. So how did they support and feed while this is being constructed, and while they live there? I think it's all very, this site, this area is what was important. You know what they always say, why live in the desert? Live where the food is. Right? Live where the food is. What are you doing living in the desert? Well, it's an important site. There's something important there. So, yes, there could have been something going on that we're just now starting to understand today. But back to my point, and then I'll hand it back to you, which is, why go and take all of your men, women, and children, build this city, construct these temples, and then walk away from it? It just doesn't make any sense. And these are some of the most beautiful temples anywhere in the world. I mean, they match anything that you can think of, from Bolivia and Peru and Egypt. And man, I'll throw Rome and Greece and Athens in there too as well. Choco Canyon is unreal. And the petroglyphs and the mythology and the pop culture is just the salt and pepper on top of what is so incredible about Choco Canyon. And I just looked it up. It's a Chetro. I said Chaco. Chetro kettle. Look the amount of, there's 100 years of labor put into that, and you just walk away, and there's 3 of these, and nobody knows what they're what they were for. Yeah, just incredible. Here, I'll pop it up. Where do you think the Anasazi went?
I honestly have no idea.
You're just going to leave it there?
I mean, I don't know where they could have gone. Maybe they could have joined another tribe, but you're transporting a ton of people. So something like that would be noticed unless they all dispersed in different locations. So to think of where they could have gone, I'm not sure.
Okay, bust a move on this. Bust a move on that. Bust a move.
Where do you think they went?
They went to the stars. They went to the stars. Are you going to share that?
No, go ahead.
I can't. I'm waiting for you.
William, thank you so much.
Thank you, William. And we need something to talk about while Cristina figures out how to left click on something.
Left click.
It's right there. Share screen.
Oh.
Look at that. I mean, seriously, take a gander at that. and
Yeah, it's
nobody knows.
beautiful.
I mean, nobody knows, and that is huge. Look at
Yeah,
that.
it is. It is ginormous.
It's ginormous. And they just walked away. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And that's Chetro Kettle. Isn't
Yeah,
it's
it
just
is.
incredible. It's incredible.
It
Yeah.
is. And it really does bewilder you in the fact that why would they leave and leave everything behind? In some respects, it kind of reminds me of Göbekli Tepe.
It sure does. Of
You're
course it does.
creating a civilization and it's not near any water. How could it thrive
Right.
without water?
Right. And here, you know what? Let me show this one too as well. There's like I said, right in this area, there's 3 of these ginormous ones. But look at that. Look at that. I mean, I'm so blown away by Choco Canyon, and nobody knows. This one doesn't have the round pits in it with the stone covers. There's 2 pits or wells, and the other one, this one only has 1 in the middle. It's different than the other ones, but it has these square portals going around and little cubby holes, right? And just beautiful.
It is. It absolutely is. Mark, thank you so much for the super sticker. You got to say the last name, Jimmy.
Oh, Tasaka.
Thank you. So while we're still talking about New Mexico, that's the topic for the entire show today. Let's now bring up White Sands. So in 1945, okay, that is where the Trinity, the world's first atomic bomb, was tested on July 16th, 1945. Why is it important to bring this up, Jimmy?
The possibility of crash retrieval alien craft. I mean, is that enough? I mean, so you have that. White Sands is significant for a lot of different reasons, and not there's too much to talk about here. But one thing that people need to really grasp between Albuquerque and Roswell and over to Holloman Air Force Base, that area, and it's a big chunk of land, that area had the smartest people in the world living, creating, inventing, testing the most advanced scientific ideas in the history of man. We're all going down in this area. And the significance of that cannot be diminished at all. And so when we talk about Roswell, or we talk about White Sands or Albuquerque, Holloman Air Force Base, Aztec, Corona, and other sightings too as well, and contact, Socorro, all of that is going down in this area. And were the ETs, the extraterrestrials that were visiting this area, was it because this was the pinnacle, the apex, right? The very tippy top of where mankind had gotten to, right? That's it. That's everything was happening right there in New Mexico. So White Sands, all of the testings, Trinity, the nuclear bomb test site. This is why, to me, it is so significant. And if ET is going to have an interest in us and with us, especially at that time, it would be right there, White Sands, New Mexico, Socorro, Albuquerque, Sandia National Labs, Holloman Air Force Base, of course, Roswell, That's where it was happening. That was ground zero for literally everything.
And we were so honored to have Robert Salas on about a month or two ago talking about UFOs and nukes. And it seems that a lot of UFO sightings actually occur near nuclear facilities. So we have the Maelstrom Air Force Base in Montana, bases in California, North Dakota, and even Russia as well. So this is also something important to mention when talking about the White Sands, where they tested the atomic bomb, because it seems that based off of the data that we have so far, based off the alleged accounts and the witness accounts that we have so far, people that work in and around nuclear facilities, they do see UFOs out in the sky. And I find that very, very fascinating. Before we continue, there are a few things that I want to mention about New Mexico. And that is, New Mexico ranks as the 5th state with UFO sightings per capita. The state with the most sightings before New Mexico are Idaho, Montana, New Hampshire, and Maine. New Mexico is the 5th biggest state in the United States, covering about 78 million acres. However, 80% of New Mexico is rural, desert, and ranch lands. Also, to mention is that New Mexico is only the 45th most densely populated state in the United States. So, for the amount of land, there's not that many people watching the skies.
There's more cows. There's more cows than people in New Mexico.
But it's the 5th state with the most UFO sightings per capita.
Absolutely.
So that just goes to show, if there were more people in New Mexico, could it possibly be the first state that has the most UFO sightings? So these are things that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about states or countries, is how much of that area is populated? What is the population, and how big, square miles or acreage is that area as well? These are all very important things to consider. So that's why New Mexico is so fascinating. All these little extra details, plus the multiple alleged UFO crashes and sightings that have happened there, it's kind of mind-blowing.
Absolutely. And it is so sparsely populated. I drove a couple of times. I drove from Albuquerque to Roswell, whatever that freeway is. And I drove 100 miles an hour, right? And did not see or pass another car.
Wow.
For 2 hours.
Jeez.
For 2 hours from Albuquerque. Maybe it was 3 hours from Albuquerque. I don't know how many miles it is from Albuquerque to Roswell. Nobody. If anything happened, and all I could think of, because and from that stretch, it's like halfway across the state, right? That stretch, driving through the desert, and I am not making any of this up. You would look to the left and look to the right and look straight. There are no lights. There's no houses. There's nothing. There's nothing but blackness. And it's crazy. And so you're driving, you're like, I get a flat tire. What's going to happen? I mean, it's cool. I don't see any cars. I can do whatever I want. There's no highway patrols. There's nobody here. I can just drive like Evel Knievel and blah. And but if anything happened, right, there's nobody out there. So yeah, UFOs, of course, cattle abductions. Nobody's going to see you, and you are alone. And it's very, very sparsely popular when you. And that's one of the wonderful things when you go to Santa Fe, you go to Albuquerque, you go to Roswell. These are big name cities that we hear about a lot. And then you go there and they're tiny and cute, right? They're small. They're small. Santa Fe's like this big. Albuquerque's like this big. I mean, you're in and out of town in a couple of minutes. You drive through town. Same thing with Roswell. It's very, very small, and the rest of the state, it's just wide open. There's nothing there. So, yeah, that's a good. Oh, can I share my UFO story?
Absolutely. Did it happen in New Mexico?
Yeah.
All right,
So,
I'm ready.
I'm with Rita, and we stop. Okay, I got to make this quick because the stories actually can get pretty long because it just happened. There's a lot of details. It's about 5 years ago, and we pull over and we went to there's an important reason for this. We went through a drive-through burger stand, and which we don't have in California. So we wanted to do this. So we got shakes, burgers, fries, chili, loaded up the car, get back in the car. We're on the freeway, and we're drinking our shakes and stuff. And Rita says, "Holy crap, there's a flying saucer." Right? I was like, "Stop. No, it's right there." And I lean forward and I look, and there is, right underneath the clouds, a flying saucer with a ring of lights around it. And it's right up. I was, whoa, keep the car on the road. Holy crap. Oh my God, there's a what? New Mexico, Roswell. How crazy? No. As that's happening, Rita spills her shake in this rental car. And so now we've got shake all over because of this flying saucer. So I'm still looking, it's still there. And I pull, and there's a rest stop, and I pull into the rest stop, and we get out of the car, look up, I'm like, oh my God, what the heck? And we've got to, just as I said that, one of my tiles just flipped down. Here. Wow, it's still moving. Here. You got to see, it's still moving. Trip on this. This just happened. It's still moving. Oh my God. What? Oh my God. Here, Cristina. So I can finish the story. I'm just going to send that to you. You can post it. Okay. I look up and that goes, look at your phone.
I don't have it on me right now.
So anyway, she's cleaning the shake out of the front seat of the car, and I'm turning around and I'm looking at this flying saucer, and there's fog, right? And it's in the fog. It's not high. It's like, and I'm like, why aren't people freaking out? And I'm standing there, and the fog clears, and it wasn't a flying saucer. No. It was a highway light on like a 300-foot pole, the biggest pole I've ever seen in my life, with a round ring of lights on the top. And the way that the fog was, right? It was at night. You couldn't see the pole. You could only see the ring of lights in the fog. And I said, Rita, look, it's a street light. And it was crazy, man. I almost wrecked my car. And I could have taken pictures of that, Cristina, and or video, and had 55 billion views. I would have been the #1 all-time video on YouTube. Yeah, it was that crazy. It was that crazy. That was New Mexico. All right, we got to take a break.
That's right, we do. We'll be right back after this.
Get your phone.
Hi, I'm Micah Hanks, and let me tell you something. I support Cristina Gomez as a Patreon subscriber, and here's why you should too. She brings all of her unique insights to a whole new generation, and all while she's also going through college. Listen, support Cristina. Become a Patreon subscriber today. You won't regret it.
Hey there, it's Cristina. Did you know you can get access to an exclusive extra segment of additional questions and answers with all of my guests, as well as behind-the-scene videos and photos? Ever wonder how I turn my small college dorm apartment into a studio where I can shoot new videos or set up lighting and backdrops for my show, or what camera I use? Yep, that video is there too, where I explain as I go along and also give the story of how I learned to do special video effects and editing. You can get access to all of that and much more by joining my Patreon supporters club. You'll be helping by supporting this channel, my research, and production costs, as well as investing in new shows coming soon. Starting from as little as $5 a month, there are several tiers you can choose from that suit your budget, and each tier carries extra perks and benefits. Join my Patreon club and become a supporter today.
So I just got my phone, and here is the picture that Jimmy was referring to. That's how it looks. And that's pretty bizarre. Do you think maybe just like the stickies came off on the top of the ceiling?
Okay, repeat that. I was, in case you didn't get it, I was sending it to myself. Okay, what was that?
I was just showing this picture of your kind of soundproof ceiling. I was asking, do you think maybe the stickies just came off?
Yes. No, the stickies are still there. It happened as I looked up, and I was just telling it, it just popped down. It's still there. And it was just funny. I jumped because, here we go. Here, I'll let everybody see it correctly. There you go. Okay. Click on share. It's the new button. There you go. Yeah, look. It just all right. Drama. Yeah, so it was a street light in New Mexico. And I'm thinking, here it is, the UFO capital of the world, and they're putting up street lights like this for no reason, that tall. And I know that there are people in Texas and New Mexico, when I tell the story, they'll post their own pictures because they've taken them. In a rainstorm when it's cloudy, these street lights are up into the clouds. They're that tall. They're not like the street lights out in front of your house, right? They're 300 foot, like a football field high, and they go up into the clouds. It's nuts. Okay. What is next? Or can I pick?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Let's do Eisenhower.
This one. Okay, so this story, the Holloman Air Force Base in 1955, is my second favorite UFO story, right next to the one that happened in Colares, Brazil in 1977. This one is a pretty fun story. I did do a show on this a while back, a full 2 hours dedicated to the Holloman Air Force Base. So take a look at that. So we're only going to briefly cover it today. And that was the one day Jimmy couldn't make it to the show. But this one's a pretty interesting story. It is entirely an alleged account, but I just find the fact that possibly if Dwight D. Eisenhower did interact and have a meeting with aliens, that's pretty exciting. That's pretty mind-blowing. Even if it's just a story that you read in a fiction novel, it's still very interesting. So this happened in 1955, and what happened was one day Eisenhower wanted to go on a hunting trip to Georgia with the treasurer of the White House and go to his plantation. But as soon as he got to Georgia, he apparently got the sniffles, got a cold. Some people say he went to the dentist, and he was MIA for 36 hours. Now, while that is true and that part is documented, this is kind of where it gets a little more extreme. So during those 36 hours where he was not communicating with the press, this is where he took a private jet from Georgia to pretty close to White Sands to have some type of private meeting. While he was on a private jet with a few of his crew members, Apparently, again, allegedly, they were able to see a UFO craft practically hovering next to it, next to the private jet, right when it was entering the vicinity of White Sands. The Eisenhower's plane landed. He entered a flying saucer. He was in there for 45 minutes. He walked out, back into his private jet, flew back to Georgia, and then from there back to the White House in Washington, D.C. Jimmy, what do the stories say when he entered that flying saucer?
Yes, there was there wasn't one, there wasn't two, there was 3 meetings at Holloman with ET, and that was in 1955. And I'll come back to that because it also happened in 1954 here next to my house when Eisenhower was in Palm Springs and got a toothache, right? And went to go see the dentist. That was the excuse. And instead of going to see the dentist, drove here, down the street to Edwards Air Force Base, where he had another meeting with ET. Now, allegedly, all of this was shot and was on film and photographs, still cameras. Treaties were entered. I'm getting ahead of myself. So back to Palm Springs. This is what gets really, really interesting. And I know some of you will think that I'm making this up. This is fact and part of the historical record. And if you haven't heard this before, go and look it up. It's right there. While this was going down while he's in Palm Springs, the Associated Press releases a statement that Eisenhower died in Palm Springs of a heart attack. That's right. And this goes out on the wires. President Eisenhower dies in Palm Springs of a heart attack while vacationing after meeting with the aliens at Edwards Air Force Base. 2 hours later, the AP retracted the president is dead press release. All of this is going on at the same time. So, yes, met with ET out at Edwards Air Force Base a year later. They come back, little follow-up meeting, little treaty signing, and that goes down out at Holloman. Now, the treaty, and I think that's what you were pointing towards, the treaty allegedly made an arrangement with ET to have an exchange of citizens, right? Some ETs can stay with us. You can take some of our friends and family. And another part of this allegedly was you can abduct and analyze. Maybe cattle studying and other things were added to the mix. And we would also get some technology. And that's the treaty that was signed at Holloman, laid out at Edwards Air Force Base a year before. Also, there's a TV series called American Horror Story. And I went to high school with the creator of American Horror Story. And but anyway, the latest season of American Horror Story, the first half of there's 10 episodes, right? So like episodes 6 through 10 are all about the treaty with Eisenhower and the meeting with the aliens. And it's fantastic what Ryan does with this story and how he makes it It's called American Horror Story. It's not really terrifying, but it's really well written science fiction. It's really well done, and it's a pretty good treatment of the subject. So yeah, another part of New Mexico, and people don't like you were saying earlier. Let's talk about Socorro. Let's talk about Corona, the crash of Corona, or Aztec, or Roswell, right? These things, and I get that. I totally get that. One of the most incredible, your number 2 is Holloman and Eisenhower. It's a fascinating story.
It is. It's a fun one. And before we continue on to the next case, while we're still on the focus of Holloman Air Force Base, there's another incident that happened in 1964. And this one was recorded, video recorded, pictures were taken, it was documented, and it was placed in the Pentagon, allegedly. And this part has been briefly covered by Jacques Vallée in his book, The Revelations, published in 1991, where he talks about the anatomy of what these entities look like. And he had stated that they had odd gray complexions and a pronounced nose, and they wore tight-fitting jumpsuits and thin headdresses that appeared to be communication devices, and in their hands, a type of translator as well. And to me, it kind of sounds like, and other people have come with this conclusion, that it's kind of like a gray mixed with an Anunnaki when you have this kind of prominent nose but a gray complexion.
Hmm.
So this happened in 1964, but then just a few years later, in 1974, a movie was made based off of this encounter called Past, Present, and Future, created by Robert Emenegger. And this is where it gets really interesting. And I'm just going to briefly go over it because there is an entire episode dedicated to this story. But pretty much, Robert Emenegger was approached by the Department of Defense, and they stated, "We want you to create a film. We're going to give you some documentation. We're going to give you some videos, and we want you to create the film of what happened. And we want you to call it Past, Present, and Future." So there's a lot more details of when he enters certain areas trying to find information. And it's also been considered that some people on his team were assigned to him by the DoD to help him with this film.
The White House, the Oval Office, it was all part of disclosure. They were going to finally just present this to the public. There was other elements to this too as well, that they were going to do a national tour through the major cities of exhibits of flying saucers and ET and Contact, and playing videos and do this thing. And even Disney was like called in to build some props. It was a huge thing, and it was all about disclosure. And this is back in the 1970s, which goes back to Holloman. So part of what Emenegger, and this is such a great part of the story, talk about a treasure hunt, right?
Yes.
And Cloak and Dagger. He was going to be given, he was promised the reel of film from Holloman that shows the craft landing, ETs walking down, and shown, right, for the first time. Now, I've had guests on the show that have seen the film. Won't admit it, but they Emenegger, he's now passed away. There has always been, just recently too, by the way, that maybe he actually had the film. They went to different offices, different Air Force bases. They went to the Pentagon. The Pentagon is in the movie. For the first time, UFO investigators are allowed to walk the halls of the Pentagon. You need to watch the movie. It's crazy. And they're in the Pentagon. And then they show one clip of the film allegedly from Holloman, and it just shows a white dot in the sky above the Air Force Base. And then later it was revealed, or they said that was a reenactment, that they had to do that for suddenly the White House pulled the support for the movie. They didn't want the film shown. Nobody knows where this film canister went. There are stories from a couple of producers on the film and Emenegger himself that, they had the canister and it went from this person to this person, and then it disappeared. And then suddenly the national tour was stopped. All of this is around that movie, UFOs Past, Present, and Future, and which makes the film so interesting to see because of, and the book that's written about the drama behind it is a fascinating read. And Emenegger's interviews that he's done over the years, again, all centered around Holloman Air Force Base, which is just west of Roswell Army Airfield, Roswell Air Force Base now. Just west of there is Holloman. Just north is Albuquerque, and then all of the fun stuff in between.
There's a lot to it, and like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, it's one of my favorite stories just because, just considering those types of possibilities, it does sound very outlandish, but that's where the excitement comes in and kind of where my child curiosity also comes in. The next one we're going to cover is the Socorro Encounter in 1964. This one is a pretty famous case. It is pretty well documented, and it's one that I think is interesting, obviously, but I'm gonna speed up just a little bit. So we know that Lonnie Zamora saw an egg-shaped craft. He saw it in the sky, he saw it land, and he saw it depart. At this time in 1964, the best thing he could call it was egg-shaped.
Mm-hmm.
But now, with the lingo as it's changed over the years, we would probably call it a tic tac today, instead of an egg shape.
Yep.
And I think that these kinds of details are important to mention, that sometimes when we add all these labels, it can be very confusing to follow along with the story when the labels are constantly changing.
Right.
But if you remove those labels and just see the data or just see the pictures, for instance, it makes it a lot easier to understand everything that is happening. So I'm going to show a picture of Lonnie Zamora and of the craft as well. But Jimmy, take it away. What happened?
Okay, and we'll keep this short because we've got other stuff that we're going to get to. But Lonnie Zamora was in his community one of the most respected citizens, and he happened to be a cop. All right, so a very stand-up guy, and when all of this goes down, and he gets on the radio and he calls for help, this spaceship takes off. His glasses, he stumbles, he can't see, he's doing everything. He goes back, hides behind his car, gets on the radio. Everybody shows up, man. He's got the FBI there, he's got the Air Force there. The next day, you've got Project Blue Book, Jacques Vallée, J. Allen Hynek flies out. I've talked to Jacques about this. I believe the two of them were together when he got the call, J. Allen Hynek, about Socorro. He flies out, and to J. Allen Hynek, that was the moment where everything changed for him when it came to UFOs and ET, and if we are being visited. He had certainly seen a lot of evidence, but this is the one case for him that changed everything. For me, it's still, it's got to be top 5. It's got to be top 4.
Wow.
It's just so documented, and it is in Project Blue Book. It was covered by everybody. It was a huge case, very well researched. And what J. Allen Hynek attempted to do with his team at Project Blue Book was absolutely debunk every angle of this, because at the time in 1964, the lunar lander, because we were in the middle of the Apollo missions going to the moon, and we were designing the lunar lander, and there was lunar lander testing going on. Okay, not there, but close enough. And you also had I don't know what, there's a technical university up the street, New Mexico Tech or whatever it's called. And so there's all kinds of things going on there, and these science students that like to hoax and play tricks and pranks on each other. So they thought that maybe that was it. Maybe these students built a balloon or some kind of craft. Could that, and the lunar lander technology, first off, it was 3 legs. They had the impressions in the ground at Socorro. The lunar lander had 4. Lunar lander was, at that time, didn't even have a body on it. It was just wire, or, a skeleton frame testing rig, and was not in the area. But they went in and investigated every single possibility, and took everything off the list. And they found out in the end that everything that it could have been, it wasn't. And they weren't left with anything but a round, white, egg-shaped craft with a symbol on the side with 3 legs that 2 or 3 little guys came out of and got back on board and flew away. And that's what happened at Socorro. Lonnie Zamora, his interviews, which anybody can go and watch, tell me he's just not stating it the way that it happened.
And his interviews are very limited as well. As soon as he saw this craft, he reported it. He was being bombarded with phone calls and people wanting to talk to him. He had mentioned over and over again that he did not like the fame, so much so that he walked away from the story. He stopped talking about it. And he has only given very, very few interviews talking about what he saw during that time. And I feel like, in a sense, that in a way adds a sense of credibility. Someone that isn't doing it for the fame, for the money and things like that. He's doing the reason to why he told the story was because he was in shock, but also it was his job. He was a policeman. He had to report things that were out of the ordinary. And as soon as he did, it seems like he somewhat regretted it, because he became pretty known to the public. Jessica, thank you so much.
Oh, Jessica, coming in strong.
Thank you.
More ramen.
Always
ramen shopping. Ramen shopping. All right. Can I choose?
Absolutely.
Farmington.
Ooh, that one's a fun one.
Yeah. Okay. And here's the deal. I know exactly what just happened, Cristina. I go Farmington. And the entire audience went,
What?
What's Farmington?
Exactly. I had those same questions as well.
This was a big sighting. And Cristina, tell us about it. And I'm going to just say the magic numbers here. 1950.
Yeah, that's right. So on March 17th, 18th, and 19th of 1950.
3 days.
3 days at 11 a.m. and 12 noon, and lasting for approximately 2 hours each day. And in Marta, of 200 to 500 UFOs and flying saucers were seen by approximately 1,500 residents of Farmington, New Mexico.
Okay, now
if this is not the biggest sighting, I don't know what is.
Share my screen. We've all seen the Roswell Daily Record.
Oh, yeah.
Check out that baby.
Oh, yeah.
Huge saucer armada jolts Farmington and crafts seen by hundreds. Speed estimated at 1,000 miles per hour at 20,000 feet. Look at that. Does it get any better?
No, it could have if it got more coverage and then more people knew about it, because even I was oblivious to the story before having it just pop up one day. But I think about last week when I was doing Strange Paradigms, I came across this and I'm like, what is this? And it blew my mind.
Yeah. First time I heard about it. And then the thing is, there were so many eyewitnesses, and everybody telling the exact same story.
Mhm.
I don't know if they've ever figured it out. Okay, hold on a minute. Let's go back. Nobody knows what we're talking about.
That's right.
Okay, so what happened? Give us day one.
Okay. Well, pretty much, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier, from 11 or 12 noon for approximately 2 hours each day for 3 days, people were seeing just countless 200 to 500 UFOs in the sky. Now, Farmington is a small town. It's not a big place. It's also a practically like an oil town. So these people are not they see a lot of things in the sky. They see a lot of planes, a lot of jets, things of this nature. It's not a big deal to them. But when they saw these craft, it was a different story altogether. However, the majority of them had mentioned that it wasn't necessarily aliens, but it was just something unknown. And we're going to get into an interview that was on Mystery Wire a little bit later. But first off, Ronan, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really, really appreciate it. What did you want me to hit on specifically, Jimmy?
Well, it was for me, the most fascinating part about this was the reports that they were ripping across the sky at 1,000 miles per hour in formations. And I'm just going off of memory. There were so many different descriptions of these formations, three squares made up of 50 craft in a square, right? So,
Right.
5 craft on a side, and then 3 squares going across the sky at 1,000 miles per hour, just ripping across. And now, what does that? It's not birds. It's not migratory swallows, right? No, that's not what's happening here. It was at 20,000 feet and repeating itself. So it's up there for a couple of hours, and everybody was out in the streets looking at this and wondering. There were, and so I think on the first day was the appearance, right? They appeared for the first time. The second day, it was crazy town, like it was hundreds and hundreds. The third day was like the first day. It chilled out, and then it just stopped after that. They never reappeared. It was just over those 3 days. Now, you just said that this is a small community. Everybody in this town saw it. Everybody. And the phone calls to the newspaper offices and the phone calls to the police department were nonstop. People were freaking out and just stood out in the streets and watched it for a couple of hours, 3 days in a row. So yes, something was going on. No explanation, nothing from the Air Force, nothing from the government, nothing from the military, nothing was stated. The town just witnessed this and it was reported on 3 days in a row. This is just one article here. There's many out there that you can go and grab.
There are, and it wasn't just reported in Farmington. It was reported nationally during this time. And what's unfortunate is that still a lot of people don't know about it. And that kind of shocks me. That probably the biggest UFO sighting of all time, at least in the United States, where hundreds, if not thousands of people are seeing hundreds of UFO in the sky.
It's an
What's
unbelievable
insane?
case. And again, we could talk about Socorro, right? And Roswell. Fascinating, right? Holloman. These are great. Farmington, man. it's an unbelievable case. Now, let's remember something. This is 3 years. This is like the spring of 1950. So it's 2.5 years after Roswell. It's 2.5 years. So saucers and flying saucers, it was starting to do its thing, and Hollywood would kick in 54, 55, but that was later, right? Earth versus the flying saucers and all of that. This was 1950. So the way to describe what was going on wasn't in the front of everybody's minds, and it wasn't like everybody was thinking aliens. Roswell was 2.5 years before. And did people remember that? Remember, that was a cover up, right? It was only in the papers for one day. So are the two related? Would there be spillover memory? No. And it's very interesting how you hear the eyewitnesses, which there are a lot of accounts on Farmington, describe what they saw. They had trouble doing it. They had nothing else to say other than, huge saucer armada, right? Jolts Farmington. And it's just incredible. It's incredible. 2.5 years after Roswell and not that far away in the great state of New Mexico.
And James E. McDonald, a noted UFO researcher, documented witness accounts 17 years later and concluded the objects could not be dismissed as cotton in the air, plasmas, or the backup of a skyhook balloon. So McDonald checked with authorities and found no skyhook balloon launches happened during that time period. Although a balloon broke up, still stands as the most likely official explanation for it. But on Mystery Wire, George Knapp interviewed UFO researcher David Marler, and he is one that is pretty knowledgeable when it comes to the Farmington Armada. And he has several of the original newspapers. But one question that I found fascinating that George asked is, when the townspeople saw hundreds of craft in the sky, did they think it was an alien invasion? Which I think is a very valid question. But Dave proceeds with, quote, to be honest, when you read the original newspaper accounts, the ones I have, they say because quite often the skeptics will attack people that have never met or that they don't know and say that these are just a bunch of white UFO believers. When you read the eyewitness testimony, George, these people are extremely grounded. They're simply saying they saw something they couldn't readily identify. They weren't saying it was an invasion from outer space. They were very pragmatic to their reporting,
Right.
simply trying to describe what they saw without trying to attribute some meaning behind it.
Right.
I do believe many people thought that these were not made in the USA, just based on the radical flight characteristics that they were seeing these objects exhibiting. Many of whom, as I mentioned, were World War II veterans from the Army and from the Navy. And so many of them were used to seeing craft, whether it was fighters or bombers. And these objects, especially the Red Leader, didn't conform to any traditional aerodynamic shape that they were familiar with at the time.
That's right. And David Marler, who I've followed Farmington with, he's one of the great researchers that about this subject. That is one of the things that he has repeatedly pointed out. They had trouble describing. They never jumped on the alien invasion. Now, it could have had the newspaper or the media handled this a little bit differently. Yeah, the public might have freaked out. I mean, if the police were in the streets, on their speakers driving around in the cars, aliens are invading, and you look up and you see this, well, yeah, you're going to have a freak out, and people are going to describe things a little bit differently. Farmington was handled differently, and the way I think that the public handled themselves pretty well. I've also read reports from some of the kids that were around witnessing this, that later on in life were adults, right? And they, did interviews as adults, and listening to them describe it. And they never panicked. They never thought that it was an alien invasion. And so I agree with David Marler. And also, if you look at the front page, can you pop up, share my screen again? Okay. If you look right here, look what it says. A little sub article. Newsman writes letter to flying saucer pilot. I would do anything to read that article. I'm not so much worried about craft seen by hundreds. No, I want to know what this is about right here. Newsman writes letter to there you go. All right. Yeah, they handled it well there in Farmington. Yeah, no doubt.
They did. And we only have a few minutes left, so let's talk about the Dulce base.
Sure.
Very briefly touch on it. Again, we have done an entire show specifically on the Dulce base. Take a look at it on the YouTube channel. But for those that haven't caught that episode, we're going to briefly go over it today. And it's important to note that the existence of the New Mexico alien base itself remains entirely unproven, even as the legends surrounding it are well documented. And so stories arose in the mid 1970s with New Mexico State Trooper Gabriel Valdez reporting a series of disturbing cattle mutilations. And it was from there that it was slowly gaining its way to fame, but then it really started off with Paul Bennewitz. And I guess a little later, Philip Schneider as well. But pretty much with Paul Bennewitz, he was capturing let me back up a little bit. Okay. So Paul Bennewitz was an entrepreneur, and he had created some pretty fantastic equipment. He had certain type of radio technology facing one of the military bases. And during that time, he was collecting information that he believed where military personnel were communicating with alien entities. And he tried to contact the military saying, like, what are you doing? No, sorry. The military contacted him and said, we don't really like you doing this. You need to be quiet. But he continued anyway, to the point where Richard Doty comes into the story and feeds Paul Bennewitz disinformation. From there, we are aware that Paul Bennewitz ended up having several mental breakdowns, going into an insane asylum. And I think like that's one of the parts that makes the Dulce base such a famous story, is because you're having Paul Bennewitz and a few others who are trying to do extensive research on the Dulce base, stating that they're seeing bizarre things happening, speaking to witnesses as well. There's some more recent researchers that have spoken to what they consider to be witnesses. And it's just one of those very ominous and dark stories. There aren't a ton of very, very dark stories, but this is one of them.
Well, he dies. I mean, well, there's that part. Phil Schneider died. He was suicided. And Paul Benowitz was known in UFO circles. Okay. He wasn't some, just some business owner there in Albuquerque. Outside of his company that he owned was outside of the entrance to Kirkland Air Force Base, and he was a contractor to the Air Force. Still is. His company is Thunderbird. And so anyway, Kirkland also very sensitive technology that was there, and some of it involved in spoofing and detecting Soviet satellites and technology from the ground up to space. And there could have been a possibility that Benowitz was videotaping that, and they thought that once he called into the base and then they put Doty on it, Doty, you got to go see this guy. And they decided then that it would be best to just tell him it's UFOs, get him off of the scent of this secret technology. That's what the Air Force thought, that they could get Paul. And I'm getting a little bit too deep into the story, but here's the deal. Benowitz was convinced that he had videotaped craft hovering and landing and taking off from Kirkland, flying saucers. Doty says he never saw the videotapes. He had seen some interesting photographs and seen, that's not what Benowitz says or said. He's no longer with us. I've asked Doty about this very specifically and directly to the point. Where is Benowitz's videotapes? Where are the photographs? Did you take them? Were you given them? And he says no. Now, Benowitz did this for a long period of time, and also was recording what he thought was ET's radio transmissions. Then he flies over Dulce. That's where Dulce comes in. And Benowitz is convinced that he sees a flying saucer on the ground. That's right. And goes and tells Doty about this. So we have those stories of Dulce and what was going on with Benowitz and Kirkland. And then we have Phil Schneider. And Phil Schneider says that he was a contractor that was working around the world. He was an engineer, structural engineer, and he was a contractor for the United States. And they were digging tunnels in the Dulce area. And as they were digging a shaft down into the ground, they pierce into a chamber. The smell comes up, this putrid smell, and they have dug into an underground alien base. And the Marines were there, or SEAL Team 6 or whatever. They got this Marine detachment, and a shootout happens. Phil, his exact description of this, you can go and listen to him tell the story, but he gets hit by some kind of ray, some kind of laser weapon, gets blasted in the chest, gets his hands, fingers blown off, his toes. He is physically messed up for the rest of his life at Dulce. So he went out and did a speaking tour and on the UFO circuit, and he's telling his story to the world. And as all of this is going on, he was up in the Portland area getting ready to speak at a conference, was at a motel there. Everything was great. He was happy. His family and things were looking positive, and he had a great outlook on life for somebody that was disabled like he was. wheelchair, no fingers, and just physically pretty messed up from Dulcie, kills himself. And the report from the official police report stated that he was found in bed with surgical tubing, had strangled himself and tied surgical tubing around his neck with no fingers. What? Right? So whether you believe Phil or not, I think that's besides the point entirely. He died under the most suspicious of circumstances, out there speaking about a very, very, very sensitive subject. He wasn't even in his wheelchair, according to the police. He was in bed, and the wheelchair was over here, and he was found in bed, strangled himself with a surgical tubing. Again, and when you read the police reports, as I have, it says right there he tied a knot with surgical. He's got no fingers. It was, I don't know. So yeah, Dulcie and everything around it, it's very, very strange.
It is.
Yeah, it's very strange. New Mexico.
Aditya, thank you so much. It says New Mexico sightings are certainly some of the most interesting. Thank you for covering those. And there's a lot more, but we simply don't have any more time to cover any other stories. But I feel like we got a good amount done today. What do you think?
Oh man. I mean, what we covered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We left 2 off the list. But we covered 8. What's up with New Mexico, man?
It's a crazy place.
Yeah, they thought it was all cool. Let's get all these smart people here, all the technology in the world. Let's build Sandia National Labs. Let's build White Sands. Let's do all of this. Let's have all of these universities here and these Air Force bases, and we'll put the atomic bomb wing down here, and we'll just make this the technical, the brainiac capital of the United States. Let's do that. Raw New Mexico. Then the aliens came. Right? It's like, man, New Mexico. It's crazy. It's great. So I'll say this really quick. And again, great show. I'll see everybody tonight on Fader Night. My memory of New Mexico is I've got just lovely people. Great. Love Roswell. Love Albuquerque. Okay. But I just remember driving in the middle of the day, hot, in the middle of the desert, and you drive for 20 miles and you don't see a thing, and then you look out and it's just pasture, right? It's just rolling, and there's one cow just out there, just by himself. I'm like, what? How did he get there? What's he doing? Where's he going? Where did he sleep last night? Where's his family? What are you doing, dude? And then I would drive for another 50 miles, not see a thing. That's New Mexico. There's nothing there. Why do the aliens hang out? So there you go. Cristina, thank you so much for having me. You're the absolute very best. I'll see you tonight on the show. See everybody. Have a great time. And I've got to get ready, get geared up for Fader Night. I'll talk to you, Cristina. Behave and be well.
All right. Bye, Jimmy. Well, this episode went so well. We did cover a lot today, and hopefully maybe you learned a new case that never could have even crossed your mind. I would like to mention that Strange Paradigms is tomorrow at 3 p.m. PST with my guest co-host, Priscilla Stone. So make sure to check that out. And on Strange Paradigms, we cover the strange and mysterious news of the week. So make sure to hit the notification bell on YouTube so that you do not miss it. I want to wish you all a wonderful day. Be safe. And remember, keep your eyes on the skies.